My name is Nancy Watt. I have Nancy Watt Communications. How I just described myself with my new BFF, I work very hard trying to stem the tide of women leaving technology, physics, science, engineering. We have a dangerous, leaky pipeline. And I disseminate a lot of evidence-based research in social psychology, neuroscience, behavioral economics, but I do so using the tools and techniques of improv. There is a theory called cognitive emotional pedagogy. Pedagogy is the science of how we learn. So using the tools and techniques of improv brings it into an experiential way. I come from a place called Second City, so the first thing is a pop quiz. Tell me who you see in this slide. Yell it out. Anybody? There you go. Who else? Good. Beautiful. Nice. Yes, he is. Oh, better than most. You're awesome. That is so great. So this is the land that I come from. I'm a conservatory graduate of Second City in Toronto. I did their improv and their comedy sketch writing in Toronto and Chicago. These are just a few of the people who have, Second City is like the farm team to Saturday Night Live. And a lot of people, I am Canadian. And in addition to bacon and back bacon and syrup, we tend to export a lot of our comedians. We have, these are just a few of the people who understand that deeply embedded into the rules of improv are more than just comedy. These are life skills that we can apply. And let me tell you how this works. The very first, I'm going to invite you to play along with me. The very first game that we play before every show, before Second City players go on stage, and this is a popular exercise that Saturday Night Live writers do before they start their sketch writing around the table, is a simple game. It's an easy game. We're going to play this game called Clap Focus. Clap Focus is where everyone will, in a minute, stand up around the table. We will have one volunteer at the table, and this individual is going to simply clap and point at someone else at the table. Simple. Whoever receives that point, the offer in improv parlance, will in turn clap and point at someone else. And that's all we're going to do. You're just going to go around your table. You are going to stand up and clap focus. Clap and point. Everyone stand up and freeze. Okay. That was very well done. Perfect job. Give yourselves a hand. Except you. What is your name? Pardon me? Shaw. Did you play sports? Do you play sports? Are you? Oh, let me tell you, this is the body language of Shaw when she's playing Clap Focus. She's on it. She is all right. She was on it. There might be a point system to it. You know, there might be, it's very competitive or something like that. That was lovely. What is your name?
Oh, goodness.
Stand up.
Yes, it's Christina.
Christina was lovely. Christina, every time she would clap and focus, give and take, receive, she was like so happy. She was like, oh, it's over to me, over to you. It's over to me, it's over to you. It's great. There is some reciprocity, lovely reciprocity in your personality. I also liked this individual because she starts going like this. Mayanne, watch how people play is how we work. And very often what's fascinating to me is that, you know, once we get the game, we level up, right? Once we get it, okay, then we'll make it even more complicated. This is something, another interesting aspect of this simple and easy game is that very often what happens is we get this, we have this voice in our head, and this voice in our head says something like, oh, don't give it to that person. You gave it to that person the last time. I know that is laughter of identification, right? Let let me tell you, that is, it is so common. It happens all the time. But it amazes me that very often women executives have this level of expectations for themselves. Please note, that was not part of the game. I did not say, make sure you do an even randomized, make sure everybody gets a point, But we have this editor in our head. I like to call it the head-editor, right? That voice in us that says, don't screw this up. I got a clapping point, right? We give ourselves higher than average expectations for how we should execute a simple project. And I got to tell you that it costs us. It costs us because when we put ourselves into a stressed state, cortisol is the stress hormone, and we narrow our thinking, and we don't get innovative, and we narrow our ability to be creative. And there's a fascinating research being done out in Berkeley. Dr. Charles Lim, he used to be at Johns Hopkins, he moved to Berkeley. He studied people in an improvised state, in a creative state of mind. And what he found was that people who are in that state, there are some parts of the brain that are suppressed and others that are activated. And the part of the brain that is suppressed when we are in that creative state of mind, where we tap that intuitive knowledge and we play and we are spontaneous, the part of the brain that is suppressed is that lateral prefrontal cortex. The lateral prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that is responsible for self-monitoring. That guardedness, that ability to filter what we can say and how we can say it. Interestingly, the part of the brain that is activated when we play is the medial prefrontal cortex. That is the part of the brain that is responsible for self-expression. Self-expression, largely affiliated, strongly aligned with feelings of freedom. We have all known, if there are those here who are invested in creativity and you have had that experience, something the psychologists call flow, where you have deep immersion in an experience, whether it be, playing guitar or painting or gardening or something, and you lose yourself in that activity. Turns out that is really, really good for you. It is, interestingly, not necessarily associated with high levels of happiness, but immersion, where you lose yourself. People say things like, 3 hours went by, I don't know where the time went. Right? Music, absolutely. That type of experience. So improv has a rule. How many here have ever taken an improv course before? Yay! I like how you put your hand up. She's like, oh, okay, I did. Okay, I did. Don't ask me. But that is wonderful. How many here know the 2 words that are the philosophy of improv? Oh, look, who said that?
I didn't even take a course.
Did you hear that? She said, I did. I didn't even take a course. I just knew it. That's lovely. Thank you. Yes, and. Yes, and is indeed the philosophy of improv. Yes, and means that. What is your name?
Sue.
Sue. When Sue and I are on stage and we're building a scene, if Sue is on stage and she says things like, whoa, look at all the turtles around here. I do not negate that. I do not block it. I do not deny the reality that she has created. I don't say, no, there's not. I say yes, and some of them are snapping turtles, and away we go in the scene. Let me tell you, the number one rule, or a very common occurrence of miscommunication, is when we do not accept the reality of the other. When we cannot accept, when we block the reality that has been created. Largely how we get politically polarized, how we are unable to accept and add on to the reality that has been created. Doesn't mean we have to agree with it. Doesn't mean we have to like it. We just need to accept it and go with that. So let me show you our very basic, intentionally simplistic quadrant for organizational organizational development from improv, because apparently if you're talking about organizational development, you have to have you have to have a quadrant. I don't know who made up that rule, but apparently it's a rule. What disc are you? What color are you? You got to have a quadrant. When someone with yes and, so the individual who has a low yes, a low agreeability, that person, you might have worked with this individual, they just don't agree a lot of the time, or they are invested in negativity. They often use what we call deconstructive language. They need to find what is wrong, and they do not really contribute their own effort very much. Remember that CNL sketch, Debbie Downer? Okay, so we call that individual the blocker. And they are very difficult to work with on stage. They are very difficult to build a scene with. The type of individual who has a high yes, but don't contribute a lot, don't and the scene, we call this person the passenger. The passenger is sort of along for the ride, you know, and while I might like some sycophantic yes people around in my life, they tend to agree with everything they say, it puts a lot of the weight on the other player to carry the scene. And we have all come across people like that are high yes and low ands. Interestingly, the type of person who has a high and, they drive the scene, and we call this guy the driver. And if anyone here has ever been to an improv show, you might have seen this guy. You know, he's the one in the scene saying things like, everybody into the alien ship, and here they come, and start the engines, and get the weapons, and they're drive, and the rest of us are just running around trying to keep up with him. We know this guy. And he very often has an overdeveloped sense of responsibility. This is the type of person who is very invested in getting the job done over being able to be inclusive with the rest of the team. He's dropping offers. He loses offers. He doesn't hear or understand what's happening in the scene. And it is a type of role that actually breeds a lot of anxiety. The type of individual that we want, therefore, is called the generator. This is where magic happens. This is where, when we feel we can agree and be confident to add our voice, oh my God, magic happens in improv, and you create things that did not exist before. In all of our product development and things, and brainstorming workshops and things like that, in our medical schools, teaching medical residents to communicate better than they do. I was speaking at the executive lunch table, and I talked about my 60 physicists at Princeton who just about killed me doing improv, but they were so creative at the end. You know, that is where magic happens, when they can tap that intuitive knowledge and surprise themselves with creativity. And I make this yes and slide intentionally simplistic, but let me tell you, it's based on good science. This woman, Dr. Amy Edmondson, she is the Novaris Chair of Harvard Business School. She's written 5 books, 4 TED Talks. She is an eminent social scientist. She has been studying a concept of psychological safety for years. And some of you might know this. Google did a huge project with their entire organization. They needed to know what it was that made their teams most effective, what it was that brought them to excellence. Long story short, 5 traits, number 1 of which was this concept called psychological safety. Psychological safety parallels our yes and improv quadrant, where we had the blocker, psychological safety. Psychological safety means that deep interdependence with your team members, that trust whereby you know that, if Sue and I are on a team together and I make a mistake, I can come to her with that. Without fear of retribution or judgment. It is that ability to know that my vulnerability and my need to admit mistakes are going to land in a soft place. And I have her back too. The performance pressure is my own accountability, my effort, my and, if you will, how much I'm willing to put forth, how much of a risk and an effort that I bring to the project. So, to parallel, where we had the blocker with a low psychological safety and a low performance pressure, Dr. Edmondson talks about this being the apathy zone. And oh my goodness, there is a lot of work to be done with this type of individual, and it's largely ineffectual. for someone who has high psychological safety, who has that ability to like the people with whom they work, but there's not a lot of accountability to actually work hard or get enough of what they do done. Amy calls this the comfort zone. Very often, someone in a comfort zone is not being challenged enough. Sometimes an individual finds themselves in the comfort zone when they are relatively new to a position. And if you think you identify with this, careful, don't stay there. Please don't stay there. You are hired for how you think and what you do, and you're costing your organization money, and you can't do that. The anxiety zone parallels our driver on stage. And the anxiety zone, oh my goodness, we know this individual too. This is the type of individual who says, well, if you want something done, you got to do it yourself, or I'll do it. That type of individual. And it is breeding ground for burnout. And Dr. Edmondson says this is the quadrant, this is the zone that she's worried about and that she wishes more organizations were worried about too. High performance pressure put on themselves and not feeling confident and psychologically safe enough with with people with whom they work. So Amy Edmondson talks about 3 things that we can do to develop what she calls the learning zone. When we build a culture, when we build the aptitude to understand that deep within our work world, we are here to learn and not perfectly execute the task at hand. When we appreciate that, we have what is called the learning zone. And the learning zone can be cultivated by 3 things. One is admit your fallibility, to be able to say to you, I need another set of eyes on this. Can you help me? Can you help me? To bring your team together in a way where they know that the future is uncertain and that we need all hands on deck. We've never been here before. To cultivate that, ask a lot of questions. And then finally, to model curiosity. The curiosity mindset is powerful. It is powerful, and it is largely charged. The principle underneath that is, again, parallel to the yes and of the philosophy of improv. There is something very powerful about putting yourself into a neurological state of play and creativity. It is freeing. And so we're going to play a game called, I need an offer from the audience of a place where you've never been but would like to travel one day. Mars? That's awesome. That's yes and. Okay. The activity, that's perfect. The activity is as follows. You're going to find a partner. Your partner is going to say, remember Mars? You have already been to Mars with your partner. You are going to say yes, and you are going to recall the entire experience that you had on your trip to Mars. I don't know what happened, but there's going to be something there, and you're going to make that story. You have already connected. You have been to Mars before. I don't know what happens on Mars. Whatever happened on Mars stays on Mars. Whatever happens, but please stand up, find a partner, and go to Mars. Say, remember Mars? Yes, and. Okay. Everyone sit down. Thank you. Have a seat. Mallory. Okay. I love that they're not sitting down. Look at this in the back. I'm coming out. Usually the volume in the room to subside, but it's not. It's not. I love, how many people here had aliens on Mars? Right? Okay, how many people got drunk? Right? What was going on there? Well, how did you get drunk? I love it. And then over there, and then Mallory, is it Mallory? She had this look on her face where she said, yes, and there's water on Mars, so that's why that worked. Right? She was so happy with her discovery. I love that. I love love that.
We met Matt Damon there.
You met, oh, hello. You met Matt Damon there. There's a wonderful organization called the Science Entertainment Exchange. I've done a little bit of work with them. They deal with scientists and the entertainment industry because apparently it makes you scientists and angry when you see something on film that doesn't work, you know, that wouldn't engineer that way, or technology wouldn't work that way. And so executives and people from the tech sector are now working with Hollywood to collaborate. And Mission was a movie. They did that. Same with the movie House and some other things. The National Science Exchange, or SEX for an acronym. Okay, I'm out of time. Let me tell you that the things that we do and how we do them are important. You know, whatever you bring, whatever you build, we are bringing ourselves to it. Whether it be our jobs and our families and our organizations and our volunteer activities, deeply it is important to understand not just what we do, but how we do it. I implore you to embrace the yes and philosophy. Finally, a quote from one of our most famous improvisers, Keith Johnstone, said, "With yes, you are rewarded with the adventure that you will take. With no, you are rewarded with the security you retain." And I tell you, it's been my strong experience that the adventure is worth it. So thank you for your excellence. Thank you for playing along. Thank you very much. It was so good.